Hey, all right. It's Sunday Live Spiritual Direction and Soul Care every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So glad that you are with us as we're hanging out again today. It's a beautiful day here where I am. It's a beautiful sunny summer day. It's very hot where I am. Jill was just outside power washing the outside of the house. It looks spick and span and beautiful. And great job, babe. And we are hanging out. So I'm really glad that we can be together today on the broadcast or the replay. I was watching one of our replays one time, going over it and realizing that if you're watching on YouTube, you might need to be reminded that all the comments that I'm interacting with are on the Facebook platform. So come on over and join. If you're watching on YouTube, come on over and join our growing community, our community at facebook.com. We have a private Facebook group there. There's other content and things to go there. So join our growing community. We're almost 600 people now. It's been awesome. Also, go check out Spiritual Direction and soulcare.com. That's where you can check out our soul care program, donate, and learn a whole bunch of other things as well right there. So glad that you are with us. So today, I thought we would jump right into it. But then I thought, last week we kind of talked about the shadow and vulnerability and authentic living. And it was like the day after my dad's funeral. And so I thought, we would dive in like we did last week. But I thought, it'd be good for us to get back to our most basic spiritual practice, which is opening to the spirit by concentrating on breath and coming to stillness, giving ourselves the gift of stillness. And so I think it's important to do that. And so let's start with that. And then we'll kind of dive into what we're talking about a little bit today. I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about. It's kind of wide open. I have a vague idea of some things I want to get to. But yeah, we're going to see how it goes today. So let's just prepare. Like we say, prepare the soils of our heart and mind, the soil of our heart and mind, to be open to reflecting and deeply listening well to one another, sharing our wisdom in this space. I love the Spiritual Direction and Soul Care community. You guys are full of wisdom. We have great conversations every week. So let's do it again here as we open to the spirit and breathe. As we breathe in and breathe out, we come to stillness. If you have kids, maybe your kids have gone back to school already, or you're getting ready to go back to school here soon. That's exciting and always feels like there's a lot to do. So a moment of stillness as we make room for the spirit. Make room for the God who is always present and always working. Let our shoulders drop as we come to rest. And as you rest, be aware of your body. Maybe pay attention to that part of your body that maybe feels tense or tight right now. I know, I feel like there's something pulling down from my feet and legs, grounding me as I breathe. I feel like a movement coming through me downwards. Energy. So I'm leaning into that and resting in that, whatever it is for you. As we breathe, come to rest. Holy Spirit, divine presence, you are with us. We welcome you as we become more and more aware of you with us always. We thank you that you have never left, but are always around us. And as we welcome you, we are also acknowledging that we are simply coming to conscious awareness that you have never left, that you always are, that in you we live and move and have our being, surrounded by your love. Amen. Amen. So how do you feel? How does it feel? It's good. It's good. So today, I thought I would talk a little bit about belief and expectations, and maybe get a little into the power of rituals or practices, spiritual practices, if that's the word you prefer, to kind of help trigger, in a good way, trigger our beliefs and expectations, trigger our own cooperation with those beliefs and expectations, to help use a fancy word, to operationalize, to make operational the things that we believe in our heads, the things that we've set our hearts upon, right? But to get us active in making it so, and to cooperating with and leaving room for God to do God's part in that process, in that journey, right? So, yeah. And Jill says she feels at peace. Yes, peace. And I wonder how, like, for y'all, how often peace itself, right? Since Jill mentions peace, how peace itself becomes this marker of if our beliefs or our expectations about our beliefs are actually true or real. Maybe you grew up in church where people said, well, I just don't have a peace about it, right? And sometimes that was true. And sometimes that was just a church way of saying, I don't agree or I don't like the idea. And I don't know why. Right? Who's feeling me on this one, right? Somebody put something in the chat. Tell me, right? Like maybe you grew up in church like that, right? Where people said, I don't have peace about it. And you knew with that person that just meant, I don't like it. I don't agree, but they didn't know why, And how often do we do that too, right? And so I think sometimes if you come out of that background, it can get you stuck because like we all want peace. We all want to feel at peace, right? And yet when you see how that gets used by other people sometimes too, right? Like, it can make you skeptical when someone says it, right? Yeah. Diane says, or I'm praying about it. I'll pray about that, which is just a nice way of saying no, but I'll finally say no in a couple weeks when you finally press me, if you don't let it go and drop it, if you don't get the message, right? But peace is crucial, right? Peace is crucial. What Jill's feeling and experiencing after just a few moments of stillness, right, is crucial. It's crucial to our well-being. It's crucial to our spiritual development. It's crucial to our understanding of cultivating a spiritual connection and growing in God devotion. Or maybe you come from a 12-step background. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're a little burned by religion, so you talk about higher power or whatever it is, right? Whatever your dialect is, whatever your vocabulary it is, but like peace is really important. It helps us feel confident that we're okay, not just in this moment, but confident in our chosen pathway, all these things, Judy says, so amazing to me that I've had confirmed again. You'll talk about themes in these talks that happen to immediately relevant in my life. Great. See, there's the Spirit, right? There's the power of the Spirit, some energy of God, right? Connecting us. I mean, where are you, Judy? Like, you have been such a faithful, like, attender on these things. Like, let us know where you're from. Cause like, I'd love to know, like how this, like, spiritual connection is happening over distance, right? You know what I mean? Like, this is God's provision. And just reading that gives me peace too, right? Like, hearing that Jill's at peace helps me be like, hey, she's at peace. That makes me feel peaceful because someone else is at peace. I can be at peace. And to hear that, like, there's some sort of like synchronicity, there's some sort of connection, there's some kind of deep movement of the Spirit of God connecting us around what we need and what we're longing for and what we're thinking about and what we're meditating on. That gives me peace too, you know? This whole thing might be about peace. Who knows with the way it's going? But like, you know, so like, as I talk about like how peace, right? It's in the Bible, it talks about how the peace is a fruit of the Spirit, right? Right? It's a sign that God's love is manifesting, that God's love is near, right? Peace isn't just about absence of conflict, right? Right? Like when you talk about the fruit of the Spirit is what? Love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self-control, all these things, right? Some people would say that the fruit of the Spirit is love. And then all the other words are descriptors of how love manifests, how God's love manifests, how the Spirit manifests in us, right? So peace, when we come to peace, even after just simply breathing everything, that's a sign of God's unremitting love for you. Yeah? When you go, gosh, these are the themes I've been thinking about, and you feel known and cared for, right? You feel as if God is providing and connecting you with mirrors and confirmation and invitation into deeper reflection, like Judy's saying, right? Like that's the goodness of God, and that's a sign of God's love for you, right? So it always all comes back to love. I know you might get sick of that, and some of y'all have known me my whole life, have just been like, he always talks about love, but that's really what it is. That's really what it all is love, right? So how do we cultivate a deeper confidence in love, right? In God's love? How do we cultivate a belief system that is rooted in love and grounded in love? To do that, we've got to interrogate what belief is, right? And we've got to come to a better understanding of our own language of belief, right? Like you might use a different dialect or a different vocabulary than I do when we talk about love, even if you're a Christian, right? Even if you go to church and things like that, right? Even if we share broadly a Christian belief, I may traffic in certain kinds of vocabulary. You may traffic in different kinds of vocabulary under that umbrella. And then when you get outside of that as well, right? So it's like part of the key to help us understand how belief works for us is to first understand how do we talk about belief individually? How do you talk about belief? What's the word you use? What does belief mean to you, right? All those things, right? And what are the dynamics of belief around these things, right? So I want us to look at a story from Mark chapter 9. And maybe we'll kind of riff off of this and then we'll get into some of this just to let us think about this, right? So this is right after the transfiguration, where Jesus goes up on the mountain and Moses and Elijah appear, and they shine with brightness, almost like transparent with white light and glory, right? And then they come down the mountain and they come to the other disciples, and it starts in verse 14. It says, they saw a large crowd around the other disciples, and the teachers of the law were arguing with the other disciples. And as soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. Now, isn't this a classic picture of life? You know, like you can be up on a mountaintop, you know, you can be up having a profound spiritual experience, and other people's lives keep going. Right? Other people's lives keep going. And when you come down off the mountain, like you could get bitter and resentful, right? Because I've just come down off the mountain, like the other disciples that were with Jesus. Jesus himself could have been like, are you kidding me? You know, like I just manifested my glory, and these guys just saw a revelation of God, and we come down here and y'all are petty and arguing about religious crap. You know what I mean? I just think it's funny, right? Um, so they come down, right? And as soon as all the other people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. And he asks, "What are you arguing with them about?" And a man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech." Do you ever feel like you just don't know what to say? And the man says, "Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." Oh man, we could talk about that all day. The paralysis that we sometimes feel when we are cut off from being able to truly express ourselves, right? The frustration, the that we feel, right? The stuckness that we feel, right? He asked the disciples to drive this, but they could not. Jesus says, "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." Isn't this interesting? So Jesus is having this high manifestation moment, high energy, high connection moment to the connection to the Spirit of God, right? And he comes down and everybody else is down off the mountain, just about petty disputes, right? I wonder what they were all arguing about if this guy has brought this son who's stuck, who they believe as, a demon keeping him from being able to speak and, some form of seizures or whatever is happening. And Jesus's own disciples who didn't go up on the mountain with him can't do it, right? They can't heal him. And the teachers of the law are arguing with him. I wonder if they're saying, "You shouldn't have even tried, it's not your place," or whatever their arguments were. You know how people get around this stuff, right? They didn't have peace about it, right? And Jesus is just like, you guys, y'all are missing it. How am I going to put up with this, right? How am I going to put up with this? So they bring the boy to him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell on the ground and rolled around foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" He said, "From childhood. It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us," right? Now, no matter what you think about, demons and things like that, right? I think this is a really powerful image of what happens within our own spirit when we're cut off from our ability to express, to truly know the language of our deepest selves and to say who we really are, right? We get bound up, gnashing of teeth, rigid, right? We get thrown into or throw ourselves into, metaphorically speaking, fire or water, right? We feel like we're drowning. We can't do anything, right? It's this really powerful image. And the guy says, "But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us," And Jesus says, "If you can, everything is possible for one who believes," he says. And immediately the boy's father explained, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Right? There's so much going on here. But I think part of the key of overcoming our unbelief, right? Finding our voices, right? And thus being released to find our voices, right? To find our deepest connection with God, right? Is rooted in understanding, right? To overcome our unbelief is rooted in understanding what we do believe, for not taking it for granted, but really saying, these are the things that I really hold to. These are the things that I really stake my sense of identity and reality on. These are the realities for me. And these are the things that I not only know and believe in my head, but these are things I expect about my reality, right? It's not just knowledge, but it's a posture of expectation, right? About these things, you know? Judy says, "I've been thinking about how our rituals have to be in alignment with truth, or it is just ritualism, not an opening to grace or understanding." Yeah. We'll talk about that in a little bit, right? So and I think one of the most basic rituals or practices we have is how we express our beliefs, right? Like our what we say, right? How we use our words about things, right? So I want us to think about, or just invite you to think about, right? Um, what you believe and the language that you use to give, you know, yourself an understanding of your beliefs, right? You know, so because when we're learning this language of the deeper life, this language of the spirit for each one of us, right? You get to choose your dialect, right? You get to choose the vocabulary that works for you, you know? Um, so that helps you organize what's happening in your mind, right? So, think about it. Like when you think of something greater, wider, something all encompassing, right? I call that God, right? I call that one God, right? What do you feel comfortable calling it, right? Maybe, as a Christian, for me, Jesus is a big deal. But some Christians really zero in on God, and Jesus is important to it, but they really center in on God. Or maybe if you come from a charismatic Pentecostal, you really zero in on the Spirit, right? What do you do, right? When do you think of when you think of the, you know, being in conversation with or connection to that wider, all-encompassing reality, God, right? Um, right? Who or what is it for you, right? This might seem really strange to go back to these basics, but it's important because, like, when you get clear again about the things that you take for granted and assume about your beliefs, that's what helps you start to get clear again about the bedrock handholds for you to activate into your beliefs, right? And it gives you a better understanding of what you're really trying to get at as you formulate spiritual practices, spiritual rituals, right? So those are some things to think about, right? Because simply you're a spiritual being, right? Each one of us, we're spiritual beings, and we're having this human experience. And like you've heard me say before, like the fundamental category mistake we make about the spiritual life when we talk about it is that we think we're talking about something other than the human life, human experience, right? And even research shows us that spiritual development really is a component of human development, right? So, understanding who is God to you? What is the ultimate, all encompassing reality for you? How do you address that one? What do you call it? What do you call them? What do you call him? Right? Or her? Some of you are in that space, right? What is that for you? Because as you surface what you've taken for granted and what you assume, it will help you clarify what you really are trying to get at in your beliefs, right? I mean, some people say things like, my feeling spiritual or connected to God means feeling connected to the earth, right? And people around me. So I go out for walks, or I work in nature, or I garden, right? And that's what helps me feel confident with who I am and my place in this world. Some people say that, right? And so some people say, therefore, I want to create each day to kind of tune into that and sit with that, right? That might be sitting out in your backyard with a cup of coffee, listening to the birds in the morning. I don't know. Some people say, my beliefs, are really about being connected to the spirit to grow and develop as a person, right? To know what my purpose is, right? To know that I can call on that spirit for guidance and assistance and inspiration, right? And so for you, your practices are about developing maybe a clear and focused connection with the spirit to tune into throughout the day, right? So you'll do different practices throughout the day, right? There's lots of different things, right? And if your answers too, as you have grown, are different than the belief system you were brought up in, it might take time to let go of those, right? Or you might realize that there are some things about the belief system you were raised in that are, even if you don't go to church anymore, right? Or you've switched or you've left behind religion. Some people in our community don't go to church. They don't practice a religion per se, right? But as they think about this, they say things like, but the story of Jesus, and Jesus is the language of the Jesus story, and who Jesus is and what Jesus represents there is deeply precious to them, right? And they don't want to ever lose that, even if they've moved along to other ways of understanding things, because this vocabulary helps us understand what we truly believe about ultimate reality, whether you call that ultimate reality God or not. This is, you may have grown up with ideals that don't feel right to you anymore, and it's okay to let that go. And maybe you grew up with ideals that didn't feel right to you anymore, but you're in the process of reframing them so that you can hold on to them because you love them so much. And that's okay to do that work too, right? It's your journey, right? Everyone has their own unique connection. And you're doing the work, I'm doing the work of finding our own and what the shape of that is ongoing and how that changes and develops and matures and, sometimes lays dormant in some seasons of life. That's all okay, right? You have this inner connection with the Spirit to lead you where you need to go. Okay. So let me look here at a couple other options, right? For us. So, okay. So what gets in the way of us, right? What gets in the way of us really understanding our beliefs and then stepping into making those real, right? Entering into and developing spiritual practices. What gets in the way of that for you? I've got some ideas, but let me look at some of our comments before we dive into that, Betsy says, I call them reality, that which is truest and abiding. Yeah. Diane Lopez, connection and guidance. Yes, that's what I yearn for. I think mine is rooted in hope. Love has been so disappointing, so I hope. That is real. That is real, Diane. I really appreciate you saying that, because like for me, I'm like, the love peddler, like I want to, send love out all the time. But I really love hearing you say that, like love in your experience, that category has kind of gotten burned for you, right? So you traffic with the hope side of things. I love that. See, this is you finding your vocabulary, clarifying for you what you believe, the framework, right, for your spiritual journey. Like, I love that. I absolutely love that. Judy says, when the man who wanted his daughter healed said, oh Lord, I'm not worthy that thou should come under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed, did not mean that the man was too sinful that Christ would visit his house or he needed to reform. It really meant, I believe I'm unworthy that God would be in me, but only say the word and you can heal me of this error in belief. My soul, which knows I am a child of God, will be set free and my daughter will already be healed. Jay! Yeah, that's great. That's absolutely great, right? See, it's like, I love this because you guys are like working out and naming out these baselines, right? This is about baselines, right? Getting a sense of the baseline for you so that you can really understand what you're getting at, right? So that you can formulate spiritual practices and an outlook on how you approach your day to day, right? Because you're this spiritual being having this human experience. So you can frame your day to day and then develop practices and ways of tuning in to your spiritual journey throughout every day, right? I love this. It's so key to get back to basics, right? What are your basics? I can't tell you what the basics are, right, for you, but what are your basics, right? Diane says, keep pushing love. Sunday, my hope may get there. Right. All right, girl. I'll do it. I love to like, for example, what I'm talking about is like Betsy says, that which is truest and abiding, right? These are categories for her. So she's looking for what is truest and abiding, right? And I would assume that some of what is true for you, Betsy, is that which is abiding. Maybe clarify that in there, for us in the chat. So that which lasts, tells you that which is most likely true, right? Maybe not. I don't know. Let us know. So as we're continuing to chat, I just want to say, what gets in the way? What are things that get in the way of us really doing this work? First one is always fear. It's fear. And you guys are not demonstrating fear in this moment because you're being fearless about saying what you think and what are these bedrock things for you, right? But for a lot of other people, fear might be a thing, right? There is fear around sussing out what we really believe, right? And I think some of why it's fearful to suss out what we really believe is because we're afraid of being judged. If we say to people, I don't use the same vocabulary set that I grew up with, or I'm not invested in that narrative, that spiritual narrative that I grew up with, or someone might just say, you're wrong if you don't use my vocabulary. Churches do that a lot, right? And sometimes we judge ourselves too, because we think, well, what I'm saying doesn't sound too sophisticated or super theological or deep enough, right? So we get fearful, right? We get fearful, and a lot of it boils down to really fear of the unknown, right? Reassessing our deepest assumed values and seeing if they work for us to really come up with, fear of the unknown, fear of what may come up for us, fear of what may happen, fear of what realizations about what we do and don't believe anymore means, right? And like I said, this can stem from other people's ideas about what it means, right? Giving other people the power to tell you if things are right or wrong for you in your most deeply personal, intimate language of the spiritual life. But other people always want to tell you that language that works for you is wrong and it has to be approved by them. And I don't need any of that in my life. I know you don't, but you can set boundaries around that, even as you do that, right? So the first thing is always fear, right? The other challenge is not being able to quiet your thoughts, and that's why we do things like coming to silence and practicing moments of focusing on breath and things like that. That's like one of the most basic practices that help make room for us to do all the other work of developing self-reflection, understanding our beliefs, and then developing other practices that help us tune in to our beliefs, tune in to the presence of God, tune in to the guiding of the Spirit, the healing of the work, that is being done in us and through us, So helping us quiet our thoughts, doing those practices are kind of like pre-practices, our pre-work. Our pre-work is to do these practices that help us get in a space to be able to even reflect well, right? So fear, quieting our thoughts, Another thing is having bigger things on your mind that need addressing, such as like unresolved worries or stress, energy levels, low energy levels that you may have, and so in that, you may have to do some personal development work first, you may need to talk to a therapist, you may need Zoloft, praise God for pharmaceuticals that can help us. I don't know, but some of that personal development work that can help us kind of just create space so that we have the ability to step into these other things, whatever it is, no judgment, go address some of those things, right? I think a lot of times, a lot of us were probably raised in spiritual spaces and religious spaces where we're uncomfortable with these conversations because really looking at what we really believe and if the vocabulary works for us is just kind of unquestioned. It's given to us and unquestioned and not allowed to be questioned. So even doing this can make us feel a little uncomfortable, like we're doing something wrong because we know we might end up disagreeing with or landing somewhere or coming to conclusions that are different than the most significant spiritual people of your life growing up. You know what I mean? And you feel bad, maybe it's going to create divergence or difference in opinions and outlook with your family, with the people that are closest to you, and that's all normal, just remember the spiritual journey, developing this stuff, reflecting on stuff. We're not in a hurry. It isn't something you rush, it's like any skill development, right? You just keep practicing and doing the work as you keep going, right? You keep practicing and you got to ease any expectations that you're putting on yourself, and definitely do not accept any expectations from anyone else outside because they're not doing your spiritual work. Even the most closest people to you who are journeying alongside you. Remember, it's a parallel process. Even if they intersect at points or conflict at points, it's a parallel process. Your work is not their work. Your journey is not their journey, right? And so, you don't have to worry about what they're doing and thinking, and you shouldn't be getting in other people's lanes and giving an assessment of what other people are doing, right? You know what I mean? Just do that parallel work together. The joy is journeying alongside, right? And letting people be who they are and letting people work at the pace that they work at, right? So those are some challenges to like really getting into space to help us understand our beliefs that hold us back from developing rituals, help us developing expectations and things like that, right? Let's see here. I see some more comments here. Yeah. Judy says, fear, perceptions, assumptions, mental projections, and even simply our thoughts. Often God enters through doors of interior holy silence. Yes. Which is why rituals of meditation are so important, properly understood. Yes. Praise God for pharmaceuticals. I love these talks. Yes. Okay. So Betsy's going to unpack a little bit more about abiding. What abide? She says, hard to describe, I guess, but maybe I can explain against the backdrop of in whom we live and move and have our being. I think sometimes of children in the womb. They are made of mother stuff, surrounded and housed by the mother, animated and fed by the mother. And mother is the physical side of all their doings and every horizon of their geography and imagination. Oh my gosh, Betsy. It's so good. Likewise with God. Okay. I believe... Likewise with God, I believe that we are surrounded, held, animated, composed, and contained in God, that God is the creator of all that is visible and invisible and contains it all. Kind of woo-woo, but that's where I'm at now, and I am with you. Somebody raise a hand because I am with you. I am with you. I think this is a beautiful picture of your bedrock understanding of beliefs. I would share that. I think it's a beautiful picture, kind of gets at what Judy talks about being our true state and what we're surrounded in. It's what we're all kind of gesturing toward in the words we use, whether it's love or hope or peace, right? Yeah, that's a word. That's a whole word right there. Yes. Preach, Betsy. Yes. Yes. Mark Murnane says, preach, Betsy. Yes. That's a whole word, you guys, about coming to understanding what we are and where we are, right? And so when we step into practices, right? So we've talked about beliefs, like resurfacing our basic assumptions about what we believe and doing that work so we kind of know what we're getting at, right? Right? Like, what's contained within what Betsy's saying too is this idea of like, this is my conception, my belief of my reality, right? Of the reality of who God is and where we are, whether despite what we see, right? But it also then shapes the posture of our heart, right? The expectation that this is the way we're living. It's out of this truth that we're going to act, right? It's out of this truth that we're going to make decisions. It's out of this truth that we're going to choose to see and understand ourselves and those all around us. See, it's not just ideas that we check a box and then go on our way and do very, very different things. This is where we get breakdown in religious circles, right? Because there's this disconnect between checking the box on Sunday or whatever, on some abstract beliefs that don't connect to reality. And then we just go off and we still do what we do, or we see people do what they do and we get really disillusioned with it, right? Where this is about belief and expectation is about the reintegrating of beliefs as a thing that forms what we are and what we do and how we act and how we see and the choices that we make, right? Same. Raised hands all the way. So we get this invites us to think about practices, right? Practices. There's a spiritual teacher named Misty Sansom who says, who calls spiritual practices triggers, right? They're things that trigger us to activate out from belief and expectation into act, right? To operationalize, to make it real, to manifest our values, to manifest who we really are, to manifest the relationships and the world around us that we intend to live in and be in, right? We call them triggers, right? You know, and this is why it's good to borrow or learn or develop your own, right? Triggers. Right? So let me find a little note here that I have about triggers, and beliefs, rituals, right? So rituals help us, calm and focus and prepare our mind for whatever we're going to do. Okay. The intention and understanding that you bring to any practice, right? The belief and expectation that you bring to any spiritual practice is what gives that practice weight, right? This is kind of what Judy was getting at, right? Where like practices and rituals sometimes don't impact us the way we used to be impacted by them, right? Because we don't bring intentionality, right, to them, right? We don't bring a sense of expectation to them. I was just talking with a friend last night who like said they were raised in a religious tradition, and they said I never really felt God in it until there was a really difficult situation in their life, like a life-threatening situation in their life. And then they saw, right, as they entered into these practices that they were familiar with, that were so sustaining to them and comforting to them, and then saw the miraculous work of God manifesting in their life. It reinvigorated those practices and rituals for them. So that's the thing too, is like when rituals aren't working, you may need to lay them aside for a while, but you can't ever completely throw them away, because sometimes just the familiarity, the comfort of the familiarity of them is what draws you back in and makes them come alive again for you, right? It's really, which means nothing's wasted, right? This is really, really great, right? So that intention and understanding that we bring, that belief and expectation that we have, that we bring to our spiritual practices, is what gives the spiritual practice weight. It's what gives it impact in our life, right? And so like some people would say that this isn't surface level or just like academic understanding. It's this deep knowing, right? This deep understanding, the thing that you know and understand in your bones, right? That comes from either lifelong learning or something deeply, powerfully intuitive that just resonates with you, right? And Misty Sansom says that's one of the reasons why cultural and indigenous rituals and practices should generally be left to cultures they originate from, right? Because spiritual appropriation isn't appropriate, right? And also too, like those rituals rise out of a particular context that isn't your context, right? See what I'm saying? So yeah. So spiritual practices and rituals that you create from the depths of your own sense of your journey, right, will be so much more significant than anything that you try to emulate, right? So this is why developing some practices, triggers for yourself, are really important, right? So those practices can come in the form of people. Those practices can come in the form of objects in your home, or rituals, or ceremonies that you create or that you participate in, right? Like when we had Dad's urn in our house for so many months after he first died, that became a thing for all of us, right? It made us feel like we were deeply connected still to him. It made us more aware on a daily kind of unspoken level of our grief and our loss, so that it was kind of processing, it gave us permission to have conversations about our grief and the processes around it, So these trigger practices, right, or things, can be people, objects, they can be practices, rituals, they can be ceremonies, right? And like I'm saying, like objects are really the easiest ones to come by, right? They might not be something as dramatic as an urn with your parents' ashes in them, right? They're usually small or easy to carry around, a rock in your pocket, a clutch cross. Sometimes you can get a olive wood clutch cross that you use. They're small little crosses that are kind of misshapen that can sit and gently rest in the palm of your hand with your fingers around them, things like that, right? Sometimes you might have a ritual of like an essential oil that you like put on your hands at night, or rub on your skin, as you pray. Like, I know some people, when they want to do a silent meditation, they'll do lavender oil to help them just kind of calm down a little bit. It's like there could be touch points, there could be little things like that, right? Small practices and ceremonies can be as simple as lighting a candle, right? They can involve praying, they can involve meditating, they can involve meditating and reading, different cards. Like, there's those little card sets that have images on them, right, that are used as prayer meditation tools, right? Lots of different things. A person can be the thing that triggers, something for you, that creates change or deeper awareness, right? Might be that person that you always have great conversations with. It might be a preacher that you listen to on the internet, right? And that can happen for good or bad, right? People can do it, right? So it's like none of it is fake, right? Like, none of it is just all in your head, right? It's about the way you connect with particular objects, their energy, what they mean, that your belief, that you've assigned, your expectation about those things, right? And these things kind of help move you and actualize into certain things for you, right? They say they even open your heart to have a posture of belief, right? Further belief, right? Judy says here, we're getting some good comments here. Until there is a difficult situation, yes, it is when we are surrounded by darkness that we can actually best see, focus on, and come into perfect alignment with the light. Until then, often true understandings don't stand out or are obscured in the fog. And if you think of darkness with a pinpoint of light in it, and your true self or soul moving towards that, it is like rebirth. I love that. I love that image. Yes. Even in the darkness, right? It's this imagery that kind of Betsy is getting at too. It dovetails nicely, right? Within a womb, right? In the dark, nurturing space. If we can see even the darkness, right? Even the hard times as that which is nurturing something alive and good and beautiful that must come forth, right? That's a radical reorientation of beliefs and expectations, right? What kind of rituals, what kind of spiritual practices help you do that, right? Help you reframe, right? Maybe it's just these conversations every Sunday on Sunday Live. I mean, really, Sunday Live is a ritual, right? Sunday Live is a practice. We gather digitally and we talk about these things. We share our wisdom with each other. This is really, really, really important. So what kind of objects or rituals, right? Or practices or people? Here's a question for you. What kind of objects, rituals, peoples, practices are you drawn to, right? Do you trust? That do you believe in, right? I'm going to put it in the chat. What objects, rituals, practices, and people are you drawn to, and do you trust, and do you believe in, right? Maybe write this down. Maybe think about this week, right? And consider also your heritage, right? Your ancestral lineage, right? Every culture has spirituality, has practices. Sometimes they don't even look overtly religious, but they have practices, right? And things that they do that communicate something about their deepest held beliefs and what they say they really are, right? What are those? Go research those if you don't know much, right? Maybe you're like me, you grew up in America and you're vaguely aware of your history and things like that. Some of that lineage is, I grew up in the upper Midwest, there are certain understandings of what reality is, what a human is, what good work is, right? What a meaningful family is, right? All those things. There's food practices in that as well. But I also have a heritage of, a lot of Irish people, some French folks, right? A lot of English people, like go back to those things and look at some of those practices, right? Because those are, for me, like those are mine. But I'm also married to a person who's practically 100% Danish, right? So there are certain Danish practices, cultural practices, that have come to mean a lot to us as a family as well. Like these are all things. That all are part of the fabric of like saying what matters to us, right? Saying what we really believe about who we are and what we are and how our life should unfold and the kind of life that we want to have and the deep connections that we want, which how are these all aspects of God around us, right? Those are some things to think about, right? What objects and rituals and practices and people are you drawn to, and do you trust and that you believe in, right? And what some of those come from your ancestral, and just remember too, then, that as you cultivate this stuff, those tools and practices and rituals, they become unique to you, right? They become unique to your family, so, let me know what you think, right? Like, and maybe share like what is a ritual, a practice, right, that you use right now, right? Which one do you use right now? What's the kind of main one? Because I shift them up all the time, right? But what's one that you use right now, and why do you use that one right now? Which ones stand out to you? Let me know. And here's some ways, as you're cultivating, as we wrap up here, here's some different things that you could include as you start developing practices, right? Think about your beliefs. Think about your expectations about those, the expectation for that reality from those beliefs, and then start cultivating a new practice, maybe one practice that you can do every day, or a practice that you can do every week at a certain time, like every Saturday morning. All right. You know what I mean? As you develop those practices, here are some things that you can do, right? Those practices could include activity and movement, right? Like I said earlier, you could work in your garden, or a specific kind of walk on your own in silence at a specific trail that you really like, or sitting in a seated position in silence and holding silence for a while, right? So it's elements of activity and movement. Or you could have a ritual that has scent, smells around it, like we talked about lavender when you pray, or something like that, a scented candle or something. Betsy says, this week I felt overwhelmed and I lit a stick of incense and waved it over everything in my house like a magic wand while I prayed and tried to consecrate different objects. God, this is a mess. Help me sort this out. I wanted to remember the spiritual value of my possessions and remind myself to care for them, not just resent them for being disorganized or overwhelming. That is so good. That is so good. And I love how in this impromptu ritual, you used smell, right? You used practice, movement, right? You prayed this, and you reframed and you named reality, right? You know how we talk about gaslighting, I think there's a lot of like, we hear now about toxic positivity. I think there's also a thing called light washing, right? Where we say, it's all going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. I love that in that you blessed it with incense, but said, this is a mess. This is a mess. Help me sort it out, right? Like I love that you named reality there, without it being like, you know what I mean? Like I love that, right? So like activity, movement, smells, sounds, right? Is there a particular track or piece of music you like, or do you like to sing, or is there a prayer chant that you pray, or maybe the sounds of nature, right? Like rustling leaves or chirping crickets or birds or whatever, right? Maybe it's objects too. Maybe you have, some of us set up altars in our home where we pray, right? Where we put objects that are signs of our intentions and our hopes and our needs, and where we call upon God standing before it with these objects, right? To help us remember people and situations that we love. I think that's a really good practice to have, is to create an altar, and sometimes even creating kind of like a small altar focused on different things, right? Like if you're mourning loss, create a grief altar, right? Create a grief altar. It doesn't have to be big and elaborate. It could be just like a little corner of a side table, right? Maybe a picture of a loved one and a candle and an object. You know what I mean? Betsy says, I have the finger symbols for old office. Yeah, so Betsy and I used to work together. They had these little finger symbols, and when things were crazy, we'd all go, yeah, and then she'd go, ding, Like it was kind of half joking, but I think in our half joking, there was something to that, right? Of like, oh my gosh, everything's insane. Let's hit this cleansing sound, this cleansing chime sound. Like, oh my gosh, like it was just like a way to mark reality, but then to keep moving, right? That's part of it too, is these things. So like, like creating a space that has objects on it, right? Photographs, image, rocks, shells that you picked up at the beach that were significant to you, right? Cards, flowers, anything that's resonating with you visually, like little totems, right? You can hold them or arrange them in different ways as a practice to help kind of tune in to God's presence and say, God, these are the things that are arranged before you differently every day, just like my life is different every day. I need you here, right? And you can use them then to kind of visualize what it is that you are asking for, what you're needing, what you want to be, there's so many different things that you can do. Judy says, the other day while revisiting my mother's IRS problems, a song came on the radio, I think from my dad, This Beautiful Mess. Dad was always a truth teller, but saw the beauty hidden in the deep. Yeah, I love that. Those moments when like that song or that moment, that thing that reminds you, right, of not just the person, but who they are and what they meant to you and the role they played. These little gifts from God to say, hey, that's still true, even if the person who bore witness to that in your life isn't there anymore. That's still true. Don't forget that, right? I love that. I absolutely love that. Oh, you guys, it's so good. We're having such a good conversation. I just think it's so awesome to be able to talk about some of these things. I can't wait for next week. Well, not next week. Next week is Labor Day weekend, so we will not be having a Sunday live. I hope you guys have a great holiday weekend. Connect with friends, grill out every day, every week, every day of the weekend if you can. Start with like hot dogs and brats and then move on to other things. Like get sick of grilling and feast. That's another practice. Invite friends over that are COVID safe, right? Invite friends over that are COVID safe and feast together. And if you need to still socially distance outside and feast together. Okay. These are practices that not only literally sustain us, but help us. There's something about food that connects us, right? That connects us on a deep spiritual level. So celebrate every day with good food, sharing life, sharing space, and, like laugh with each other, enjoy each other, but also have real conversations, right? And have a moment where you say to people that you're feasting with, gosh, I love feasting. It's so important for our lives. And I love feasting with you. It connects me with you, right? You know what I mean? Like take time. Don't just let it like happen, right? But like take time, even if it's one sentence, to acknowledge what you're doing with other people and why it's significant. It will matter and it will elevate people's awareness of what they believe, what they're hoping for, right? Those words themselves could be the trigger for a spiritual transformation for some people, or an invitation into more spiritual development for the people around you and for yourself. These are all things that you can do, Mark talks about the songs Promises and Jireh. These songs have been coming on when I need to hear them, like my mom is reaching out. Yes. And pray for my back surgery on Wednesday morning. We will. Yes, it is your mom reaching out. It's your mom reminding you of the goodness that's all around you. There is goodness coming for you. So next week, what is it? No Sunday Live next Sunday. And then after that, we will kick off Thriving in Uncertainty. We're going to start September 12th. We're going to start with 7 strategies. We're going to talk about 7 strategies over the course of a few weeks for thriving in uncertainty. It's going to be rooted in some of the work of a person named Christine Carter. It's going to be really, really good. I'm going to have a ton of fun. I can't wait because, you might be tired of it. But the reality is things are still uncertain. Like, it's crazy, you guys, what's going on with all the COVID stuff. It's getting bad again. And I want us to not give into fear. But I also want us to really have some practical spiritual tools and ways of thinking about this next season. The hospital I work at has reinstated all its COVID restrictions. I just talked this morning with a person who's a hospital chaplain down in Birmingham, Alabama, going through hard stuff as well. On top of that, it's like there's a lot going on, y'all. People have surgeries coming up. We're all growing. We're all trying to do our thing. We're all trying to work through lots of different stuff, but we're not alone. We're not alone. We have this community, and we're going to learn some insanely practical tools on how to thrive in the midst of all of that uncertainty. We're going to do it. And we are going to walk together and walk in healing. I love y'all. Have a great, great week. And we'll see you September 12th for Thriving in Uncertainty, starting September 12th. So no Sunday Live next week, and we'll be back the week after that, September 12th. Can't wait to see you. Throw some more prayer requests, any ways that we can be supporting you, whether you're watching on the replay or not, into the chat so that we can be lifting you guys up. I'll play some music on the way out, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings, but now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet.